Hello and welcome. You're watching Business Plus. We're bringing you stories from the world of business, policy and economy. Our top story today, 4 investors in Byju's have moved NCLT to file a mismanagement suit against CEO and founder Byju Raveendran, deeming him, and I quote, unfit to run the firm, seeking his ouster from the board. Further, the suit will also be seeking a forensic audit of the company, appointment of a new board and the rights issue be termed void. The suit comes a day after Karnataka High Court ruled in favor of the CEO. The outcome of that important EGM, which was also held today, that is not out just as yet. But remember, the court has put a hold, the Karnataka High Court as of yesterday has put a hold to the outcome, suggesting that they will be hearing Raveendran's plea in the next couple of days as of 13th of March, further to which perhaps the fate of that EGM will be decided. The EGM to oust Raveendran has also concluded. Voting results are expected to come out very, very shortly. We don't know what the EGM has decided. I think we do know what the EGM has decided, but the actual results are yet to be out. Raveendran is currently battling on all fronts. What will happen to Byju Raveendran? I think we'll need to discuss that. Karthik Malhotra here with me. Also with us is Srinath Sridharan. I want to come to you first, Srinath. A lot is happening at the Byju's. To break it down to our viewers, let's understand what has happened with NCLT. We know now that 4 investors have moved NCLT. What does it really mean for Byju's?
See, I think very clear. This is the second suit that they're facing along with on the account of debt that they have taken, and this is a serious one because they're actually saying that there are multiple issues with investor rights as well as mismanagement of the company. So both are very, very serious allegations, and if it stands NCLT's test, then it just means that this company is going to probably implode. And we have spoken on Byju's time and again. And I think debt is the biggest sword that's hanging on their neck today.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Karthik, mismanagement, calling him unfit to run the organization, asking for a forensic audit. It is a lot for even Byju Raveendran.
And I think, Shweta, this has been in the making for a very long time. Remember that 2 EGMs actually got cancelled because Byju Raveendran and the board, which includes his brother Riju Raveendran and his wife Divya Gokulnath, were never in favor of the EGM. And I think the intention of investors calling for the EGM has been very clear for, I think, ever since July last year. They don't want Byju Raveendran to continue as the CEO of the company, and they want him perhaps to even resign from the board. I think investors have a right, when they've put in so much money in an organization, put in so much faith and have been invested for such a long period of time, and when they see value erosion happening day after day, month after month, and issues are aplenty. I mean, we can spend days just talking about what the magnitude of the issues is really. So the fact is, the intentions of the board has been fairly clear, and it is no surprise, obviously, Byju Raveendran and his family, which sits on the board, also knows that participating in the EGM or looking at complying with the the motives of the investors is going to lead to just one thing, which is exit the board, quit. They don't want to come under that pressure, and hence they decide not to attend the EGM. In fact, seek a relief from Karnataka High Court even before the EGM, pretty much, making sure that whatever decision comes out by virtue of that EGM is not going to be binding. So the message is fairly clear. I think the intention of the board is very clear, but at the same time, the intention of Byju Raveendran also seems very clear. He's a man who is just unwilling to give up. I think so much has gone wrong, from the $1.2 billion debt to financial reporting of FY23 still pending, to the inability for the company to sell Epic and Great Learning in the US to repay part of that debt, if not all of it, and multiple other corporate governance issues which have surfaced, issues of foreign exchange violation, FEMA charges against him. So multiple issues, he's fighting multiple battles, but he's not a man who seems to be willing to give up or even concede a little bit of ground to investors who have parked so much money in the company.
Absolutely. And the timing of all of this is interesting. I think it's important to also put this in perspective. Just as that EGM was on, Srinath, we also heard of investors simultaneously moving to NCLT. So they are not leaving any stone unturned to ensure that Byju Raveendran is ousted. Now, given that the matter is already being heard in Karnataka High Court, and Karnataka High Court will be hearing it on 13th of March, can any order that comes out of NCLT be binding on Byju's and Byju Raveendran?
So very simple. If a suit is actually accepted in NCLT, any legal cases around the same topic will have to stand. I mean, will have to be held as is and probably brought under NCLT. So that's the nature of NCLT. And here, the investors are very relentless, right? But I have a slightly divergent view as well. Imagine this is a EGM of shareholders who hold 30% of shares in the company. They called for it, and the 26% stake held by the founder and his family call it as illegal. And very circumspect is that the same set of directors and investors who used to sit on this board of this company resigned, did not make any allegations, and when they resigned, they started making all the noise and allegations. So I also wonder, when we speak about corporate governance, let's be very practical. What did they do when they were sitting on those boards? Did they not know that huge amount of monies was being taken abroad for, I mean, where they parked at the hedge fund run by a very young manager and all that? So sometimes you wonder.
So are you hinting, it appears that all of them are together going after Byju Raveendran? Is there more to it, what we know, or more than what we know in media and in public domain?
I mean, probably yes, but it doesn't absolve the investors, because they sat on the board for very, very long time. I mean, all through with subsequent rounds of valuations, they sat through on the board, and they resigned from the board, I think, only about 7 or 6 months ago, and now claim that everything went wrong. I mean, what did they do until 6 months ago?
Okay, fair
And
enough.
this is something that, to me, I mean, all these companies write books on corporate governance, but they also have to take accountability for corporate governance if they sat on that board or if they stayed invested, right? Yes, it doesn't take away the right of their right to ask questions, their right to call for an EGM. And that is where the entire drama starts. I mean, I agree with Karthik when he says that it looks like it's all over for Byju's, because where is the money? And the great learning, the only great learning in this entire aspect is doesn't seem to be the company, but just that you need better governance.
Absolutely. But, you know, come to think of it, I think it's a fair point. You had investors sitting on the board only resigning about 6 or 8 months ago. And by that time, we don't know if internally they dissented to a lot of calls that were taken by Byju Raveendran, his wife or his brother. We don't know any of that just as yet. But we do know they resigned eventually. I mean, that also in a way is a lack of trust and faith in the existing board of Byju's, albeit it happened 6 months ago, but they did put their foot down.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no denying, obviously, when these investors are sitting on the board of Byju's, you cannot put the blame squarely on Byju Raveendran or his family members who sit on the board. So I think the board members, the former board members at that time should have put their feet down respectively to ensure that whatever decisions Byju Raveendran was trying to take unilaterally should not have been permitted to take unilaterally. But the fact is, perhaps their voice was not heard. Perhaps there was still a majority, so to speak, with the family on one side and other board members not united enough in their fight against the decisions being taken by the board. And hence, when they realize that their voice is not being heard in the board, what is the point of being on the board? Might as well, it's a sinking ship. You know your opinion is not being valued, not being heard. Hypothetically, I don't know what really happened because it's not a listed company and we don't have access to any con calls, etc. So, so perhaps they would have decided that let's just be shareholders rather than take responsibility of a sinking ship. Now, is that the morally correct thing to do or not?
I mean, it's always easy to jump out of a sinking
right. You
ship.
can jump out of a sinking ship, but then the point is, if everybody jumps out of that sinking ship, who's the real sailor who's going to tide it through those through those very, very turbulent times? And Byju Raveendran continues to be that lone warrior as he comes out publicly and says that he's fighting these multiple battles at multiple fronts, and he's pretty much the chief of that fighting army. But the fact of the matter still is that I think enough time has lapsed.
Right.
From the time the board resigned, from the time things started going bad for Byju's, the company, for Think and Learn, the whole parent company, for Byju Raveendran to have at least taken a top angle 35,000 view of things, realize that perhaps if nothing else, there is too much stress on him to take decisions. He might have been better off relinquishing the post of CEO. And even though he has, for Byju's, he has Arjun Mohan as the CEO, even at a group level, he should have taken a 35,000 feet view, should have asked for support, and that support also just in terms of an advisory panel on management, on corporate governance in the form of Rajneesh Kumar or Mohandas Pai is perhaps not enough. So at some point, as a founder, as somebody who had built a company with scaled a valuation of $22 billion, you should have been responsible to ensure that a proper independent board and an independent CEO, bereft of the stress of the founder, is in a position to navigate the company.
Absolutely.
On that front, Byju Raveendran, to my mind, has failed.
Okay, now that's a fair point. Did not take a bird's eye view of the situation, was too involved perhaps with his heart and in his mind, and perhaps could not take decisions that were needed about 6 months ago. It's already getting bad for him. Srinath, we all looking at what is coming out of that EGM. It's a chaos, it's a mayhem. Some people, employees of Byju's, are entering that meeting under pseudonym. They are creating a havoc. They're saying, don't let go of Byju's. We want Byju Raveendran to be on the board. Then we also know there are a lot of investors who've not participated, some of whom have been thrown out. What exactly is happening at that EGM?
I think it's a great jamboree, right? I mean, so people who are not exported come in, like, for example, disgruntled employees. I mean, I don't know whether you saw the video floating on Instagram of a family that came into Byju's office and took away a television set because they were frustrated trying to get a refund for one of their programs. I mean, stuff like this, you are having all kinds of stakeholders. I mean, that's a message, right? It is not just about this. I mean, if Byju's and family might claim this disgruntled shareholders, and the shareholders might claim something against the management, but it's not just them. The affected party includes lots and lots of employees and customers who are just simply frustrated with this. So there's a clear message on the wall that there is no more trust. It's all about trust. In a crisis, it comes to trust. And I think that's where Byju Raveendran is missing the larger picture. And I'm also kind of second guessing the investors here. While they sat on the board, they probably did not do anything because it could have hurt the valuation of the stakes that they themselves had. And I think here they must have now finally made peace, finally, from 22 billion to whatever it is now, a few $100 million, of saying that there is no residual value to our stakes, but we want to send a message because we don't want any other portfolio company treating us the way this guy is treated. I think that's how I take it. It is not as if the grass is greener or the case is cleaner on the other side. There is something amiss, definitely. And I think this would be a great learning for government of India as well as from regulation point of view. What if large sums of equity capital is deployed in a private unlisted company? What about corporate governance there? Do you treat them equivalent to a listed entity? And I think the message on the wall is out here for all of us.
Absolutely. A lot of learnings.
Srinath is absolutely right in his observation, because that seems to be the only reason why the shareholders, the majority shareholders, especially these 4 investors who have called for the EGM, have also been opposing to the rights issue, which was done by Byju Raveendran just about a month ago or so. And a $22 million valuation for rights issue to existing shareholders is pretty much erosion of their value, even though they are able to acquire a greater stake at a lower price. But overall on the books, it is a massive erosion, and hence the shareholders do not want that rights issue to also be legally something that can be put a claim to. In addition to that, and I think again a very, very important part, and this is something that we have also been pushing on our show, Shweta, is corporate governance of unlisted companies.
Absolutely.
The Ministry of Corporate Affairs has to put a watchdog in place, because at the end of the day, you may not have retail investors, and hence SEBI will not directly get involved because these are not publicly traded shares. But at the end of the day, there is real money, there is real stakes here on the table, and misgovernance can cost not just the investors, but overall any other future fund flow into India, into Indian startups. There's a big message there that we don't have the right checks and balances and the right watchdogs and the right governance standards to ensure that that companies are allowed to be misgoverned and erode shareholder wealth, even though they are not retail shareholders.
Absolutely. So publicly listed or not, I think shareholders and their money erosion is something that the government should take note of. But moving away from financial issues for a moment, and actually staying on with financial issues, because that is what ED Lookout Circular is also about, FEMA violations. What's happening there, Srinath? We do know that ED is investigating FEMA violations. Byju Raveendran has stated categorically there have been no FEMA violations. Perhaps we did not declare every time we were either buying a company or someone was investing in our company, an offshore entity was investing in our company, and perhaps we were lost in the legality of it, but there has been no FEMA violations.
So I think that lost in the maze of legality doesn't cut ties at all. I mean, if you're going to be worth $22 billion, you better get the right lawyers to ensure whatever you're doing is right. And also the news that's been coming around of why was a subsidiary set up in Dubai and kind of huge sums of money, I think around 1,700 crore is what is ascribed as a value, has been moved to that as a commission payout for sales commission. And allegedly that belongs to the promoters. I think that's a large question. I mean, these are things that you can't say that I did not know the legality of it. Clearly, no. I think there must be there's no smoke without fire. But the reality is, if it were so clear, why is it that they not simply put it out? And I'm also very mindful when you're dealing with the large PEs and VCs, they want to ensure that whatever they do don't trip any laws and regulations. They've been in business for long, and most of their investors are in India. They've been based out of India with teams in India. These are global funds. So it's not as if they did not know the law. And so I think there will be more to answer for Byju Raveendran and family to come back here with clarity.
All right, and before I wind up, as I mentioned, plethora of issues at Byju, financials being one of them. The other, of course, is, and for the benefit of our larger viewers, people who are still enrolled into Byju's courses, what happens to them? Some of them asking for that refund. We saw that video that Srinath referred to of people taking away as much as a television set from an existing Byju center.
A big one at that, which would have fetched them some value, if not monetary, there at least it would have done well in their drawing rooms. But I think, Srinath mentioned this earlier, it is trust, right? I think businesses thrive on trust. They can be built on an idea. They can be sustained perhaps when it comes to venture money or PE money coming in. But for businesses to thrive, you've got to have the right trust component and trust quotient in place. And that is where I think the brand Byju's has been compromised and hit the most. Now, the fact of the matter is, online education per se has unfortunately, since the recovery of COVID or the dwindling number of COVID cases, online education per se has not been as lucrative as it once was. But remember, Byju started off not as an online company, in fact started off as a company or as a center where people would study for CAT and JEE exams. Now that part of the business is something which I think endeared Akash also to Byju's, because the DNA of the company and the DNA of the founders has pretty much been teachers. At the end of the day, these are teachers, and at the end of the day, the objective when Byju started off in 2008, 2009 was to get more and more students to come learn at their centers, and hence the organic sort of chemistry, if I can use the wordplay there, between Akash and Byju's is absolutely rock solid. So that part of the business perhaps is something which Byju's would want to continue running, and Akash likely to be the only profitable piece in that entire messed up pie of think and learn, right? But that apart, I think online courses is something which may have, at least for now, outlived their utility. And those who want to seek refunds are obviously now hitting a very, very solid wall, a thick wall, because where is the money to refund? Because at the end of the day, you've had cases where Byju Ravindran's own houses in Bangalore have been mortgaged to raise some money from banks to pay salaries. There are employees who are complaining about their PF not being credited. There are employees who have quit, who are yet to receive their full and final. So at the end of the day, there is no money, and when there is no money and there is a sort of bank run or an edtech run equivalent that we are seeing at Byju's, customers or clients or those who have paid the fees and looking for a refund are now resorting to all sorts of means to get some recovery, albeit in the form of large television sets.
I hope there is some recovery for the customers, existing customers who are currently struggling with their refunds. Srinath, thank you very much for taking time out. Thank you for joining us on this story. We continue to track all those updates here on News9. But remember, as we sum up what has happened in the past 48 hours at Byju's, the biggest challenge that Byju Raveendran is faced with at the moment is that Some of its investors, 4 to be particular, have moved NCLT. They have also called for an EGM that has now voted to oust the family members. The final decision, of course, is awaited of that EGM. Meanwhile, there is relief from Karnataka High Court, which will also be hearing the matter as of 13th of March. A lot happening in Byju's, and all of it asking for a change of guard when it comes to Byju's. Ouster of Byju Raveendran. Byju Raveendran unrelenting at the moment. We'll continue tracking those updates right here on News 9. Thank you very much for watching.